A very good morning, afternoon, or evening to all of you from Taiwan. My name is Wopereis and I work for the World Vegetable Center. It's a pleasure for me to speak about pursuing green growth of the vegetable sector in low-income countries, where the need for enhanced vegetable production and consumption is greatest. Food systems worldwide are damaging human and planetary health. Every country in the world is affected by malnutrition. An estimated 2 billion people are overweight, and this contributes to a rise in obesity and non-communicable diseases, including heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And another estimated 2 billion people suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, in particular iron and vitamin A. And these health issues come at a tremendous cost to society. At the same time, food systems place a disproportionate burden on the environment, contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, expansion of cropland, pressure on water resources, excessive nitrogen and phosphor applications leading to eutrophication and acidification of ecosystems and biodiversity loss. The influential 2019 Lancet report on food planet health argued that for a transformation to healthy diets to occur by 2050, substantial dietary shifts will be needed. Global consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes will have to double, and consumption of foods such as red meat and sugars will have to be reduced by more than 50%. A diet rich in plant-based foods and with fewer animal-sourced foods also leads to a substantial reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. However, it's important to note that other environmental stresses considered in the Lancet report are not reduced with a shift in diets to more plant-based food. Further reduction of environmental damage by food systems will require substantial improvements in production practices and reducing food losses and waste. And in this presentation, I will focus on these aspects, production practices and reducing food loss, and discuss opportunities for green growth in the vegetable sector in low-income countries. Vegetables are important sources of many micronutrients, dietary fiber, and health-promoting phytochemicals. They're among the most diverse, colorful, and tastiest foods for achieving balanced diets. And you see a wonderful selection of highly nutritious and sturdy African traditional vegetables on this slide. However, the reality is that with the exception of some East Asian countries, the world consumes far less fruits and vegetables than the 400 grams per day recommended by the World Health Organization. The situation is often worse in low-income countries. You can see that on the slide on the left for vegetables, and looking at the box plot for sub-Saharan Africa, you can see that half of the countries south of the Sahara are at only 70 grams of vegetables per capita per day. And that's clearly below the 240 grams of vegetables per day recommended by the World Health Organization. That's that red dotted line there, and far below the 360 grams of vegetables per day considered optimal by Afshin and co-workers in an influential paper published last year, and that's that red solid line you see there. There's even a risk of vegetable consumption decreasing further due to the COVID-19 pandemic effect on people's incomes and disruption of supply chains. Rapid urbanization in low-income countries means that there will be many more mouths to feed, not just with food, but with nutritious food to fight the malnutrition figures I mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, demand for vegetables is changing, and the danger is that consumption levels will drop even further. Urban consumers are often more inclined to increase their intake of meat and purchase highly processed food items. Consuming vegetables is not exactly automatic and needs to be actively stimulated to fight malnutrition. The supply side of the vegetable sector in low-income countries is characterized by low productivity, as you can see here on the screen with the example of tomato. To put these data in perspective, under fully controlled greenhouse conditions, and of course with vastly different varieties and management, Dutch tomato farmers can reach 600 tons per hectare. Adding to that, post-harvest losses of up to 40% or more add to difficulties on the supply side because of poor storage, transport, and processing capacity. Food loss means that all efforts, basically, to produce these vegetables are in vain, representing, of course, an unnecessary burden to the environment, besides loss of nutritious food and economic opportunities. Food waste, I talked about food loss, but food waste from retail to the consumer is not much of an issue in low-income countries. So I'll talk about food loss. A life cycle analysis conducted for urban tomato production in Benin, West Africa by French researchers showed huge environmental issues, in particular as related to pesticide use and excess application of nitrogen and phosphor fertilizer. Overall environmental impact of urban garden tomatoes in Benin were 4 to 23 times greater than the impact of tomatoes grown in European cropping systems. And that was due to low and variable crop yields, high fuel consumption for irrigation, large emissions of nutrients, and an excessive use of insecticides, raising, of course, concerns not only about environmental issues, but also about food safety. Increasing vegetable supply must be done in a way that is safe for the farmer, the consumer, and the environment. And this calls for training of farmers and input dealers and affordable traceability systems or other ways to enhance trust between producers and consumers. A first step towards green growth is to introduce diversity. Varieties in low-income countries have often been introduced decades ago, and they're just not well suited to prevailing growth conditions. And these growth conditions are, of course, affected by climate change. Making a shift towards vegetable species and varieties with resistance to biotic stresses, pests and diseases, improved shelf life, and tolerance to heat, flooding, and salinity will be particularly important. Introducing vegetable diversity into farmers' fields will strengthen farmers' resilience against climate change and offer, of course, also more market opportunities. A special effort is needed to reintroduce traditional vegetables, such as the ones you can see at the bottom of this slide. Traditional vegetables are usually highly nutritious and indigenous to a specific region or introduced from another region a very long time ago. And most of these traditional vegetables are adaptable to poor quality soils, mostly tolerant to abiotic stresses such as drought and saline soils, resistant to various pests and diseases, and thus require fewer inputs compared to global vegetables, their global cousins, such as tomatoes and cabbages. And that means they present lower risk to farmers and their use is therefore more environmental friendly. This slide illustrates this with data from about 250 farmers in Tanzania. As you can see, farmers can make as much money out of traditional vegetables such as African nightshade, amaranth, and Ethiopian mustard as out of tomatoes. Just look at the brown bars in the graph. And in any case, much more than with maize. And if you look at the external input levels, in particular insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides, it seems that traditional vegetables really require fewer of such inputs than tomatoes. The incentive for farmers to adopt traditional vegetable crops would be strong market demand, which may not be a given, as traditional vegetable crops may be perceived as outdated or old-fashioned by a growing and young urban population. Information campaigns are needed to raise interest in traditional vegetables, and these should emphasize taste, cultural value, ease of preparation, and not just advocate their nutritional, health, and environmental benefits. They could include promotion campaigns with chefs and consumer champions to celebrate nutrition, taste, and cultural values of these vegetables. There's an encouraging trend in East Africa, in particular in Kenya and Tanzania, where traditional vegetables can again be found in informal wet markets and supermarkets. A second step towards green growth is getting it right in terms of choice of seed, the growth environment, and crop management. Moving farmers to more precise crop management, or if you like, precision horticulture, will definitely increase productivity and economic returns and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions, waste, and contamination of soil and water bodies. This will require improving farmers' access to new technologies, such as disease-resistant and climate-smart varieties of vegetables, improved seedling nurseries, or grafting technology. It will also require improving farmers' capacity to observe, analyze, and take appropriate decisions for action, and to plan and organize for such action. Affordable field-based sensors or mobile phone-based recognition of pest and disease symptoms or nutrient deficiencies may further improve decision-making. A step further is to attempt to manage the growth environment itself through the introduction of protected cultivation technology. This type of protected cultivation is still rarely practiced in low-income countries, but it may allow a farmer to better cope with extreme weather conditions, may facilitate controlling diseases and insect pests with minimal pesticide application, use water and fertilizer more efficiently, and in general aim for higher productivity levels because of reduced risk and a prolonged harvest period. A third step towards green growth is to move from a crop and growing season focus to a cropping systems and multi-year focus, and making sustainable use of natural capital rather than relying on external inputs. This can be achieved based on a thorough understanding of agroecological principles and investment in soil and plant health, for example, by introducing rotations, push-pull crops to manage insect pests, intercropping, and recycling of crop residues and waste. Such investments may lead to a cascade of systems benefits, including carbon sequestration, better water retention, improved soil nutrient supplying capacity, and improved plant health, and in general enable farmers to adopt a preventive rather than a curative approach towards crop management. The conversion process towards a more nature-positive approach to vegetable farming will take time. The incentive for farmers to go this route would be enhanced sales and prices, because consumers perceive their products to be safer because of reduced reliance on pesticides and of higher quality. Farmers will consider this type of approach only if their access to land and water resources is secure, which may not be the case in urban and peri-urban environments. A fourth step towards green growth is reducing and transforming food loss. This will require investments in storage, processing, and distribution capacity, and practical, cost-effective approaches, including zero-energy evaporative coolers, as you can see on the slide top right, solar dryers below it, hermetically sealed plastic storage bags, or simply using plastic crates instead of bags to transport vegetable produce to markets. The private sector, I think, will take care of many issues related to losses in food safety when products are sold in supermarkets. However, the vast majority of urban consumers in low-income countries purchase their food in informal wet markets or just on the roadside, which also raise concerns about microbial contamination. There are vast opportunities to cut back on post-harvest losses and increase hygiene and food safety in and around such informal and wet markets. And the public sector must step in and invest in improved infrastructure to improve these conditions. A fifth last step towards green growth is shortening value chains and establishing durable linkages between producers and markets, reducing uncertainty. Cutting back on distance food travels will have a direct impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Rural Veg has introduced the packhouse model in South Asia, where farmer cooperatives aggregate, clean, sort, and label vegetable produce for marketing in cities nearby. The packhouse is an open area with a roof. You can see an example on the screen, equipped with a small cold room powered by a CoolBot. And that's a device that tricks a regular air conditioner unit in cooling to 6 degrees Celsius. This investment allows harmonizing demand and supply for vegetables and cutting back on post-harvest losses. To reshape vegetable food systems in low-income countries, there's a real need to work on both demand, pull, and supply, push, and governance. Consumers may need convincing to consume vegetables because they may have food safety concerns, or they may have negative perceptions about vegetables in general. Or vegetables may simply be unaffordable or inaccessible. We really need to understand the true barriers to enhance vegetable consumption and, of course, then devise appropriate interventions to boost demand. Much work is also needed on the supply side, push, and I talked a lot about that in this presentation. There's a tremendous scope to provide vegetable farmers with better technology, starting with quality seed. But seed is not enough. The seed needs to be accompanied by good soil and water management practices, and as much as possible rely on biocontrol and protected cultivation technology to keep out pests and diseases. Moving beyond precision horticulture towards a nature-positive horticultural approach based on agroecological principles and investments in soil and plant health is highly desirable, but it may not be easy to implement because of precarious land tenure situation for many peri-urban and urban vegetable growers in low-income countries. Post-harvest losses can be tackled through investments in storage, food processing and market infrastructure, and certainly also through shortening of value chains. All of this will require adaptive, participatory learning and action research with stakeholders across the vegetable value chain, including farmer organizations and small and medium-sized enterprises involved in input provision, processing, distribution, and marketing. Green growth of the vegetable sector in low-income countries will also require solid governance and political leadership at different levels and public-private sector collaboration. Healthy food systems for people and planet need to be built bottom-up, with all stakeholders having a say, from producers to traders and consumers, and with balanced involvement of food businesses, civil society, health and education sectors, and local policy and decision makers. The World Vegetable Center is initiating this type of work near cities in Africa, linking urban consumers with locally and safely produced vegetables. In West Africa, this is done with support from the European Union and the Netherlands, and in East Africa with support from the IKEA Foundation. Thank you very much for your attention.